Is this the future of agriculture? Vegetables and lettuce heads stacked on several floors, artificially lit. Fully automatic breeding, protected from drought, frost and storm. This is no future vision, but already reality in Japan.
In this system, we can produce food under optimum conditions with high nutrient content and good taste all year round. That's the big difference to working in the field.
Field work in Brandenburg, wrapped in thick clouds of dust. The consequences of the drought. Without massive artificial irrigation, the harvest would be completely lost. Will our fields soon collapse?
Under the current conditions, I'd have to recommend my children to find another job.
Devastating droughts here, severe flooding elsewhere. Food production is in danger worldwide, with new famines impending. Researchers all over the world are looking for solutions. A normal harvesting operation in Japan. The workers are dressed in protective suits, hygienically packed. The environment is also clinically clean. These lettuce heads grow without soil, free of pesticides. The room temperature always remains the same.
I find it very pleasant that I can always work indoors regardless of the weather, better than in a rice field.
Vertical farming is the name of this method from Japan that's spread in Kyoto. The roots thrive in a liquid nutrient solution without topsoil, but with the same natural ingredients such as sodium and potassium. There are lighting lamps with similar color temperatures to sunlight. Solar collectors and the green facade show that progress is at home here. The University of Chiba in Japan. In this futuristic-looking greenhouse, experiments are being carried out with vertical vegetable cultivation. Professor Toyoki Kozai invented this method in the 1970s already. At that time, he still had problems with the right light and high electricity costs. The breakthrough came with LED technology.
I originally wanted to help farmers who own little land. Vertical agriculture makes it possible to produce 100 times the annual harvest on a single plot of land, as with conventional farming. It's therefore worth investing in such vegetable factories. These plants can be set up anywhere. It's an important step towards sustainable agriculture. There are no losses during harvesting, and we use less energy for transport. Productivity and economic efficiency can be increased even further with the latest technology.
This method is mainly used for vegetables and lettuce heads. Research into staple foods such as cereals or potatoes hasn't reached that stage yet.
After the Fukushima catastrophe, interest in these new greenhouses is particularly high in Japan, as it is possible to produce all year round here, regardless of external influences. Thanks to our method, the farmers have a stable production without damage from insects or worms. This is one of the reasons why this method is sustainable. And you can run these vegetable factories in the middle of the city and produce them locally as needed.
The opposite, farming out in the field. Once again, the farmers lack water, lots of water, and it is much too hot. Temperatures of up to 40 degrees centigrade let the soil dry out, up to 2 meters deep. In large parts of Germany, drought prevailed in the summer. The consequence were losses or even total destruction of the harvest with high financial detriment. Farmer Hans-Heinrich Grünhagen in Brandenburg is one of the suffering farmers. He grows potatoes and corn. His farm is situated in an area with light, dry soils. Nothing would grow on his farm without the help of expensive irrigation systems. The water is pumped deep from underground, and experts predict that even more extreme dry periods will come.
If you look at the ground here, there's no humidity. No plant can live here. That's why there's nothing to be found. There are 2 small potatoes on it, here and a few more, but they need water. We have a very dry year this year, just like last year. It just rained half of what would have been normal at this time of year. These soils were so dry from last year already that the little rain we had in the last days is not enough to feed the plants.
But how can the problems of the farmers be solved? How can the food supply of the future be ensured? The University of Wageningen in the Netherlands is working on this. At the renowned agricultural university, scientists are working to finally defeat hunger in the 21st century with new ideas and methods. They assume that in 30 years' time, twice as much food as today will have to be produced. But the conditions for this have worsened. In order to not exacerbate the climate crisis, the area available for food crops must not be increased. New methods are therefore needed to produce food in the future. Ernst van den Ende heads the Department of Plant Sciences. The situation is very problematic for him.
So if we change nothing and we keep on consuming the way we are doing, and if we don't optimize the way we produce our food, then for the next 40 years we will need to produce as much food as we did over the last 8,000 years. And I think that gives really a good impression how big the challenge is to feed the world in 2050.
With its huge greenhouses, the Netherlands is the second largest food exporter in the world. And they watch their resources. Vegetable growers need much less water to grow tomatoes than anywhere else, thanks to new irrigation techniques.
Our research is focusing on to produce more food, but at the same time to do it with less inputs. So we need to produce more nutritious food, more safe food. And this challenge, more with less and better, is really the overarching theme of our research programs.
Still, everyday life mostly looks like in Almeria, Spain. Under this sea of plastic tarpaulins lies Europe's largest vegetable garden, artificially irrigated, growing for export. Millions of tons of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers and other varieties go mostly to Germany from here. But intensive cultivation has its price. Pesticides and fertilizers contribute to the fact that hardly anything grows here outside the greenhouses. And the Spanish vegetable farmers are running out of water. The entire area is drying up. The situation in Africa is even more extreme, especially south of the Sahara. One reason is the rise in weather catastrophes. The poor and hungry hardly stand a chance to free themselves from their misery, complains Secretary General of Welthungerhilfe, a German aid association.
Since 2014, the number of hungry people has risen again. At the moment, there are 821 million. And there are about 30 million people suffering from hunger due to direct consequences of climate change.
Die Menschen sind ganz persönlich, ganz akut selber betroffen.
The people are acutely affected because storms hit the country, which had previously been completely unknown. And that's a sign of the destructive power that this changing climate can trigger, and how the people in the countries in which we work are at the mercy of this force.
Disasters, droughts and floods not only destroy the habitat of the inhabitants, but also valuable cultivated areas for agriculture. Brandenburg farmer Grünhagen can still solve his problems with drought with technical aid supported by the EU. Nevertheless, he is pessimistic about his future.
We can only continue farming here with irrigation and are no longer competitive worldwide. The potatoes that we water are needed here in the region. That's a market with which we can still compete.
Back to Japan, to the company Spread in Kyoto, headquarters for the new world of agriculture. Spread is currently the world's largest vertical production farm. An employee of the company on her way to work. Her clothes don't look like farm work clothes. The hygiene regulations are strict, almost like in an operating theatre. Germ buds must not enter production from outside, because the food should be clean and safe. In this closed, sterile environment, the plants grow without the use of pesticides and fertilizers. More than 50,000 lettuce heads leave the factory every day. Only the packaging of lettuce takes place in this hall. In others, different kinds of vegetables grow, including mushrooms and exotic herbs. The offer is large. Out of fear of germs in the water, people here say, please do not wash, otherwise the vegetables will get dirty. A further advantage of this kind of indoor farming is that the plants thrive on several levels, one above the other, so they require little valuable area. And in some halls, the cultivation is already fully automatic. Shinji Inada founded the factory 15 years ago.
At that time, climate change or the explosion of the world population were not a big issue. There was also no market for vegetables from the factory. But now we are making good profits. I don't think that factories will completely replace conventional farming, but I think that our way of farming will play a central role in 20, 30 years. We also want to transfer the technology to poor countries so that they can produce their own food.
Due to the short distances to the supermarkets and restaurants, the goods don't spoil during transport, unlike traditional supply chains. Almost all Japanese supermarkets receive food from artificial farms. Japan is a leader in this technology, and there are already 200 such facilities. The customers like to buy such lettuce heads, even if they are a little more expensive and are packed in plastic on the shelf. Especially since the catastrophe of Fukushima, consumers have been looking for safe food.
I'm glad everything's so clean, and I can use the lettuce right away without having to wash it first.
The smiled-at beginnings of artificial vegetable production have turned into a profitable business within 15 years. On the other hand, traditional agriculture in Japan is also in a deep crisis. We are heading for the rice fields outside Kyoto. Rice cultivation includes the use of pesticides, a necessary aid for the farmers to survive. Rice, which is sacred to many Japanese, is heavily subsidized in Japan, and the market is largely closed off by high tariffs. Rice imports are seen as an attack on a cultural heritage. But the areas under cultivation are dwindling. The average size of a Japanese farm is just 1.8 hectares. That's only enough as a sideline. That's why there is hardly any new blood. The average age of the farmers is 66 years. They form cooperatives in many places in order to be able to operate more effectively. The increase in natural disasters is also a problem for them. This need has made farmer Akira Iijima inventive. This is my aquaponic system, he proudly explains. In his small greenhouse, he tries a new form of agriculture. Aquaponic. Fish are bred in large tanks. Akira Iijima has 250 sturgeons in his facility. The fish's excrements are pumped off and used as fertilizer for various types of vegetables. The water cleaned from the plants is returned to the fish tanks. From rice farmer to modern aquaponic farmer, almost all kinds of vegetables thrive here all year round and independent of climate changes. His greenhouse has even withstood an earthquake. The farmers in his neighborhood had big problems this year. It rained too much and the plants didn't get enough sun. Akira Iijima, on the other hand, can carry his harvest to the market and dreams of an even bigger plant. Just like the one standing in Berlin in the Schöneberg district, in the courtyard of an old industrial area. Greenhouses for growing vegetables in the middle of the city. Groups of visitors from all over the world crowd here to have the operators explain the special features to them. This is also an aquaponic farm, but on a grand scale. The current product, the capital basil, grown by the excretions of fish bred in these tanks. The fish that is sold on Berlin's markets is of course called capital perch.
We want to produce where there is consumption to ensure we don't have long transport chains, long cooling chains, and that we simply have a better CO2 balance. I think our fish, the capital perch, is the freshest fish you can buy here in Berlin.
The principle is as simple as it's old. The water contaminated by the fish is poured over the plants as fertilizer. It was used in this way in China and by the Maya centuries ago. The plants grow faster on shelves or raised beds in these rooms than in a natural environment. The young entrepreneurs produce 9,500 basil pots per week for a supermarket chain. It won't take long before the construction costs of 1.4 million euros have been recouped. $7.7 billion people currently live on our planet. In just 30 years, it will be 11 billion, and more are leaving the rural regions. According to a United Nations study, a good 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. So much more needs to be built, especially in Asia. There, the megacities already extend over huge areas that agriculture lacks. So more plants, more green in the cities. A special challenge also for the urban planners, because the inhabitants of the megacities do not only have to be supplied with living space, water and energy, but where is there still room for the cultivation of food? Düsseldorf architect Christoph Ingenhofen and his staff are planning huge residential and office complexes in almost all megacities in the world and want to make them worth living in.
In cities, we are dealing with overheating. Cities are significantly warmer and hotter than the surrounding countryside. We are dealing with cities that are not only densely populated, so to speak, but also sealed. We have little contact between the environment and the soil. This has negative consequences, because infiltration, displacement and distribution of this problem is no longer possible. This is where greening, green architecture and so on play an important role.
This residential and office complex in Singapore, as high as the Berlin Television Tower, is an example of the work of the Düsseldorf architects. 20,000 people live and work here, a small town in a single building complex. In the middle of it is a kind of green heart. 350 different plant species are to provide better air and a better climate.
This is certainly not the solution for normal rural Central European areas, but it is the solution for highly dense locations. If you are planning green areas and can also use them for food production at the same time, then you have two effects. You have the shading effect, you have the desettlement effect, you have the whole topic of oxygen production. You have all the advantages of the plant itself and can generate an additional one, and thus save CO2, because transport routes are saved.
So green spaces are not just for recreation. Agricultural businesses in high-rise buildings or on roofs next to huge office and residential towers?
I wouldn't smile at that, although of course it seems bizarre, because I simply believe that in Central Europe one can hardly imagine the density, intensity and difficulty of many of these cities in the next 50 years. What we have to do now is to reach our goals in a quality that allows the people there to lead a healthy life permanently.
What still sounds like dreams of the future to us is already reality in Asia. But even in Europe, more and more people are moving to the cities, and the transport routes for food are becoming longer. We are in the center of Tokyo. The Ginza is the main shopping street of the metropolis of millions, seat of large Japanese corporations and long-established institutions. In the middle of it, a rice field on the roof of a high-rise building. A sake brewery grows the raw material for its rice wine here. In Japan, sake is not just an alcoholic drink, it's an indispensable part of the country's culture, as is rice. For this brewery, sake and rice therefore belong right in the heart of Tokyo. At the same time, it's an experimental field for new varieties. The roof of a high-rise building as agricultural land.
In the beginning, they didn't take us seriously. They said that there wouldn't be any rice growing here, as it's much too bright here at night and much too hot on the roof. But we have had good experiences and are harvesting more and more. The rice grows well here. I think it's right that people in Japan are looking for different ways to grow rice and vegetables. It's a challenge, and rice is part of our tradition.
The brewery makes 50 bottles of sake per season from its small rice field on the roof. Just a few blocks away is another high-rise building. On the 13th floor of a normal office complex, a consulting firm has set up a small farm on one floor. Another example of how rural life can come to the city. The employees here should not only stroke the animals for their own relaxation, the company also wants its employees to learn something about agriculture, to get a feeling for nature in the middle of the megacity Tokyo. One office worker is said to have already decided to quit his job in order to become a farmer. The venerable Gropius building in the center of Berlin. Right next to the entrance hall of the museum is a restaurant. Illuminated glass cabinets arouse the curiosity of visitors. Inside grow herbs and lettuce heads. An Israeli startup based in Berlin has installed these plant cabinets in some of the city's restaurants and in the shops of a supermarket chain. They function similarly to the plant factories in Japan and ensure that the herbs are brought fresh to the table. 50 such mini greenhouses are located in Berlin alone. About 200 are already distributed in Europe. 2 square meter area in the plant cabinet corresponds to 250 square meters of regular farmland. The restaurant manager comes from Israel. These investments are worthwhile for her, even if the next market with fresh goods is not far away.
We actually harvest it very shortly before eating, before cooking. So the plants remain very strong in taste and very crispy. And you can't get this richness of taste and crispness on the normal market.
And less food is wasted in the kitchen because you only take what is really needed for the dishes.
We are harvesting from our farms 2 or 3 times a week. We don't have to wash it because it doesn't have any dirt. it has just water and roots. So it's perfect for the cook and also for the guests. This is, for example, is crystal lettuce. First of all, it's lettuce that is very hard to get in the market. So you can see that it's super crispy. And the fact that you are harvesting it and putting it straight into the plate, it makes a huge difference. But the other thing, and I think this is the most important one, is that we have access to flavors and to plants that you cannot get anywhere. For example, this one is mustard, and it's something that you cannot get in the market. It tastes really like mustard. It's like it's sharp and spicy. Another thing, for example, that you cannot get and we have access to is wasabi. It tastes like the real Japanese thing, like the wasabi powder, but it's fresh.
Sure, this kind of special preparation is rather for the pleasure of a metropolitan minority. These greenhouses in Germany are certainly not intended for mass production yet. The lettuce does not have to be transported far until it reaches the table. Plants from the factory grown under artificial sunlight, without soil and with little water. An important step for the food of the future and a challenge for conventional agriculture.
We work with nature. If you look around here, larks are singing, insects are flying. That doesn't happen in these facilities. I don't think that's what you want in the future. It's not nature. It's an artificial product. I just can't imagine it. It has nothing more to do with my ethos as a farmer. For me, a farmer needs an area where something grows, an area that I can take care of my plants. Being a traditional farmer, my ethos forbids me to perform artificial farming.
But do we have a choice? Classic agriculture alone will not be able to supply the growing world population for long without the help of the laboratory, with plants that develop in a controlled way without the use of fertilizers and pesticides and with little water.
We will soon be populated by 10 or even 11 billion people, and there will be a city size that we still can't really grasp. At the moment, it's almost considered progress if we manage the amount at all. To build this is a key technology of the 21st century, without which survival on this planet will not take place.
What do you want? Do you want to produce in such a way that you have suboptimal yields and you need to use a bigger surface, and that means that you have to destroy nature? Or you want to have your optimal yields per square meter? So my opinion is that we use our agricultural fields in such a way that we optimize the growth in order to save the environment.
Research is still in its infancy, but vertical agriculture will have to conquer cities all over the world in a few decades. Safe, clean and sustainable. Otherwise, food can really become scarce.